Hey, this is Lloyd, and we are dressed up medieval again, which means this must be another medieval foresters video. And today we're going to be making some meat. So, if you were a medieval peasant and you were to come out into the woods like this with your bow and arrows, your arrows had better be blunts. And blunt is basically something that's been carved or turned out on a lathe that kind of looks like an acorn, an inch or so. And it's basically like a ball that goes on the end of an arrow shaft, and it's got a little tiny tack-sized protrusion on the end of it. And they're no good for hunting anything other than extremely small game, like rabbits or birds. And if you were to be caught in the King's Forest with anything but these, you were probably going to be charged for attempting to poach the king's deer. In the medieval forest, you would use these blunts to get small birds, much like this one here. This is about the size of what you could expect to take down with a blunt. This is a partridge, or a ruffed grouse more specifically. Full disclosure, I didn't take this one out with a blunt arrow. It kamikazed the side of my truck this afternoon. In the province that I live, you actually need a permit to possess roadkill. So if you decide that you're going to do something with roadkill, make sure you look into your local laws. But anyway, let's bring the camera in. I'm going to show you how to manufacture a little bit of medieval meat out of this. And if you're a vegetarian or you have a problem with stuff like this, yeah, now's the time to click away. So the first thing we're going to do with a bird like this, in medieval times, if you were a peasant, you probably would have used every bit of this bird. You wouldn't clean it the way that I'm going to. You probably would have plucked it and stewed it and used absolutely every part. But I portray a forester in the medieval reenactment group, which is a little higher on the pecking order, kind of a working class, middle class kind of person. So I would reward my dogs with part of this bird, and that's kind of how I've always cleaned it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to step on the wings, and it may seem kind of strange that we're doing this, but we're going to pull very hard on the legs, and pretty much everything's going to come out. And we're going to leave this for the coyotes or the foxes or the crows. And the next thing we're going to do is take the wings off. And I like to do that with my hatchet. It's probably the easiest thing. There's old guys from when I was a kid that could clean a partridge in seconds, but I just like to take the wings off. This guy's been dead for a couple hours now. Try not to take my thumb off, it's pretty important. And so at this point, we got a mass of feathers. We're gonna just kind of rip into the skin, and hopefully this guy wasn't beat up too badly in the collision from the bird's point of view. So probably an awful lot like going skydiving and then halfway down realizing that you forgot your parachute. And there's food for the crows and the coyotes. And what we're left with, once we get the feathers off here, get the feathers off me, is the large breast meat. These are the muscles that operate those wings. And so you see, it's not that horrific a process. I mean, I might as well be using this guy as letting him sit in a ditch somewhere. And hopefully, yeah, you can see a bit of damage right here where he hit the truck. But yeah, hopefully my angles were right, and most of that is on camera. And that's what we're left with. So, you know, this might be a half-decent skill in the future if the food supply really is diminishing, like they say. Some of these traditional skills may be of some use once again. So yeah, let's cook this guy up and see what we get. So we're going to cook up our bird here, and we're going to use a medieval recipe, which is one of my favorites. It's called small bird and bacon stew, and to that end we're going to chop up some bacon and throw in our Dutch oven. The original recipe calls for 6 rashers of fatty bacon, however much that is, I don't know. I'm just going to use some leftover bacon I had in the fridge here. Yeah, I'm going to chop it fairly big. That's just my preference. And there's a couple of ingredients that the original recipe calls for that I don't have. I don't have any bay leaves in the house right now, so we're going to do without those. But that's not going to be the end of the world. And it also calls for chopped nuts. Specifically, it wants me to put hazelnuts in it. And I don't have any of those either because I don't like nuts. But so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to throw our bacon in there, and we're going to try not to break our leg on the giant crock pot. We'll get our bacon moving around. Usually it doesn't stick. Decided to do this inside today because it's cold and rainy out. I don't like taking my camera out in the rain. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw in some mushrooms. I'm not going to chop these, I'm just going to kind of break them up. And there's all kinds of mushrooms out in the woods near my house, but I don't know anything about them. And they have lookalikes. So I can go to the grocery store and I can get mushrooms that are pretty much guaranteed not to kill me. And they're only about $3, so, you know, that's a good deal. $3 and not poisoning yourself. If you're a mushroom expert and you know about this stuff, that's a good thing. But I'm not. I am not an expert at anything. I am a jack of all trades and a master of none. Mushrooms are not one of the things that I know very much about. But in medieval times, people would know what mushrooms were edible in their local area. Because, well, food shortage and, well, Uncle Cedric might go try this new kind of mushroom, and Uncle Cedric died and knew not to use that one. So yeah, we're putting a bunch of brown mushrooms in this. You can use whatever kind you like, I guess. And so, got a little bit of bacon fat in there. Bacon fat and mushrooms work pretty good together. You tie up the heat a little bit. Recipe also calls for some salt. I'm gonna throw some pickling salt in. It's probably more like medieval salt. It's all I use around the house. I don't like normal salt. So I'm gonna throw a bunch of that in. And that's gonna pull some of the moisture out of the mushrooms. And add to our stew broth. It's a little bit like reducing mushrooms to make mushroom ketchup, which is a completely different recipe. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw some garlic in this, and I don't know, I'm going to use 3 pieces of garlic. I don't know how much is enough. I don't have the most refined sense of taste in the world, so maybe this is enough. Get the skin off it here. Or most of the skin off it anyway. There we go. Garlic is one of those things that was used quite a bit in the medieval era. It's easy to grow and pretty tasty, and if you believe the herb people, it's probably pretty good for you too. They say it's good for stomach ailments and stuff like that. I don't know. I just like the taste of it. So yeah, I'm not gonna chop this thin or anything. I'm gonna let the cooking do the work for me. I'm just gonna crush this with my knife and throw it in. Crush this with my knife, and I'm gonna cut that one in half. And I'll throw it in. And crush this one with my knife. Maybe cut it in half. Throw it in. Oh, lost a piece on the floor. Alright. Always lose lots of stuff on the floor. So now with the garlic in, we'll give that a spin. Bacon's starting to cook up pretty good. Now the original recipe calls for pepper. And in medieval times, pepper usually meant long pepper, not the kind that we use today. So I'm going to use, let's use 4. And long pepper kind of looks like the stuff that grows on alder trees. But yeah, it's the medieval kind, so we'll put that in the whole thing here and crush that up. It's jumping all over the place. That's why I like to put my hand over it when I'm beating it down to begin with. Yeah, it's still jumping out. That's what happens. Maybe I'll use the bigger mortar and pestle. This one's a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. There we go. I don't want to grind this too much. I like my pepper to have some texture, a little bit of chunk to it, so add that in there. It's actually starting to smell pretty good. Got some of the liquid coming out of the mushrooms there already. So the next thing, in the original recipe, it would say that we put your bird in, the whole bird, with bones and all. But I'm gonna take some of the meat off of the bone here, because I'm not going to be using 4 or 5 birds and feeding a whole bunch of people. I'm going to be using 1 bird and feeding Lloyd. And so I'm just going to cut Mr. Rough Grouse into some strips here. Doesn't have to be perfect. I am a forester after all. This is not for the king of the island. So there's 1/2 of the bird breast in there. Yeah, kind of roll the meat off here. Try to avoid collateral finger damage. This might not be the prettiest job, but what do you expect for a bird that was hit by a truck? Free food, can't complain. So there's a little bit more meat on this. Let's see what more we can get off here. Another little strip. Strip over there. And we've pretty much parted them out. There ain't much left there. Yeah, if I had a pet cat or something, I'd probably give this to the cat. Yeah, that's more bone than anything else. So yeah, put that in the bin. And then we're going to have to wash and sanitize my cutting board here. So now that we've got spices in there, and some mushrooms, and some bacon, and some birds. We'll let that cook. Oh, well, that is browning nicely. As I said before, if you're going to use roadkill in the province that I live, you need a permit, so I got one of those from the game wardens, Department of Natural Resources. It's just due diligence since I'm going to be making a YouTube video. If you live in Canada and you want to collect some roadkill, I don't think they're going to be too worried. If you pick up a partridge, you pick up a deer or a moose, it might be a different story. But because I was going to throw this on the YouTube, I decided that it might be a good idea to do my due diligence and get my permit. So everything's browned up pretty good. The next thing this calls for is a beer. And it wants to use red ale, the original recipe, but I'm not using red ale because I don't have any. I normally buy the red ale when my friend Simon comes over from the UK. He likes the red ale. In fact, I haven't seen a whole lot of beer that he doesn't like, but I'm using my favorite go-to beer around here. It's a Belgian wheat beer called Hoegaarden, and It's kind of medieval in origin, I guess. Back in medieval times they called it white beer. I doubt they flavored it with coriander and orange peel back then, but yeah, what do I know? I'm not a beer historian. And we'll put a bit more in there. And then what we don't use, we'll drink. Mouthful into me. And so the original recipe called for bay leaves, and this is basically just a pile of meat and mushrooms and beer at this point. So I don't know what we got in the old cupboard here that I don't have any bay leaves. I know that, so I don't know. Maybe we'll throw in a bit of basil. Maybe we'll throw in a lot of basil. There we go. It's not correct to the original recipe, but pretty sure they had basil back in the day. And then, of course, me being a middle class kind of guy, I wouldn't necessarily have access to all the fancy herbs and spices that a rich guy would have. So I'm going to bring the camera in so you can have a look at this simmering away. So we got a good head of steam coming off of this. We'll turn down the heat. If this was on a campfire, I'd probably pick it up above the coals a bit. Yeah, clean the junk off my stirring stick here. And so now it wants me to, in the original recipe anyway, simmer this for 2.5 hours, or until the meat is falling off the bone of the bird. And I don't think we're going to have to do it that long, because we're just cooking one bird, we're not cooking 4. So yeah, we got our spices in there, we got our beer in there, or ale, or whatever the hell it is. And we got our bird, bacon, yeah, everything that we need to put in there is in there. Can't think of anything else I got in the house that I want to put in there. So yeah, we'll let that simmer away and reduce for a bit. See what we get when it's done. So the recipe says that this should be served over bread, and I have not made medieval bread in about a year or so, so I'm using this dark rye bread, which is one of my favorites. So I'm going to cut a couple of thick slices. I've previously cleaned up my cutting board. After I wash it down, I'd stick it in the oven on low heat just to dry it out. I don't know if that does anything good or bad, but I don't know. I do it. So yeah, got a couple of pieces of rye bread. And I quite like the store-bought rye bread. I don't know if they use rye or just call it rye bread, but so anyway, can't quite fit all my pieces of bread in my bowl, so I'm going to put one on the side there. And spoon this on top there. Oh, some fell on the side. Looks like I've probably got enough for 2 servings here. Oh, yeah, another piece of partridge fell on the side there. Yeah, I'm gonna get some of those juices in there as well. So yeah, definitely enough for 2 people here. I'm not going to be a piggy and eat it all. I'm probably being pretty liberal with the amount of bread that was needed. I probably could have got away with 1 slice. But yeah, that's what it looks like. And I'm betting she'll be pretty tasty. So got my medieval plate, got my medieval horn spoon, and I'm going to dig in. The only thing I'd have done different if I had more people would I'd have thrown some water in it, and I wouldn't have reduced the broth quite as much. So it would have soaked up in the bread, but I don't have any guests. So I like them thick, and I'm going to have a couple of beer with this, I think. And so I don't need that much broth. So as always, if you like the work that I do, feel free to hit the like button. It really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And I'm not doing them every week anymore, but I'll do them when I feel like it. And so you'll get notified if you click the bell thing sometimes, depending on what YouTube wants to do that week. And as always, if you don't like what you see here, share it with your enemies, and I will punish them for free. And until next time, stay safe during the whole lockdown thing, and yeah, don't forget to pick up that roadkill. Have a good day.